Okay, my name is Dr. Obadile Kambon. I'm here from University of Ghana at Legon Institute of African Studies. And my talk is entitled Experiences at the World's Largest Online African Language Learning Institute. I decided to use a little bit of hyperbole in case anyone here has a bigger online African Learning Institute. Then they would say, no, mine is bigger. I said, yes, I got you to come. If you notice, the background is actually what I'm wearing today because I kind of made some changes, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get started. Last month, the supervisor of my PhD thesis sent an email on our university mailing list. And the title of the article he sent was Universities in Digital Dark Ages. And it came out in University World News April 24th. And basically it was talking about how universities kind of lag behind in a lot of ICT initiatives. And one of the points that was made, meanwhile outside these universities, schools and colleges, people are using podcasts, websites, blogs, YouTube, and Wikipedia to education, that's how they termed it, each other, to learn from each other. It's certainly learning, but not as we know it, and no longer under the control of existing educational institutions or the existing educational professions. The recent past might suggest the possibility of an educational Arab Spring, an upheaval where the masses connected by mobiles and social media overthrow the established order with its institutions, officials, and values. I may add bureaucracy, but that's also neither here nor there. Another point that was made was that eventually these institutions will come on board and come to terms with a mobile, connected world needing new skills, new attitudes, and new formats. And because I founded an institution which will actually be the case study that I will be discussing, called Abibitumi Kasa. Can everyone say that? Abibitumi Kasa. Very good. It's spelled exactly how it sounds, and it translates to Black Power Language, and it's a coinage in the Tree language. There wasn't very much of a discussion about Black Power in the Tree language previously, but because we need the language to do what we need it to do, then we make it do what it do. So this is Abibitumi Kasa. Now, the mission of Abibitumi Kasa is it's an African language institute, but it also teaches other things, and is to provide instruction and resources in the interest of liberation, sovereignty, and nation building by and for African people. When we say African people, we're not only talking about continental Africans, we're talking about African in the broader sense, including diaspora. The knowledge and principles necessary for this goal are embedded in the languages of African people. Therefore, a central focus of Abibitumi Kasa is to provide language instruction which highlights information including but not limited to African worldview, culture, math, science, and spirituality. Oftentimes when we talk about African indigenous languages, like sometimes I teach at University of Ghana, I ask my students, do you learn multiplication, do you learn these things in indigenous languages? They laugh, like it's impossible to do that. And it really lets you know how disconnected they are from anything, because we had very, very intricate and developed systems of mathematics, weighing gold dust, all of these types of things, astronomy, so forth and so on, but because they've only been exposed to English or whatever, they don't even know anything about it. So we try to keep it broad. And I'd like to start off, or set the tone rather, with some kernels of wisdom. One of these is African champions must break the chain that links African ideas to European ones and listen to the voice of the ancestors without European interpreters. That's by Jacob Carruthers in his book Medu Neter. If you may not be familiar with Medu Neter, that's the indigenous language, that's the indigenous name for hieroglyphics. And hieroglyphics is basically a direct translation of Medu Neter, meaning divine words, divine script. Another one from the Kikongo language is Makumbongi Kamatombulwanga Zako, which is the community's political institution does not borrow foreign dialects to discuss its political matters or to educate its members. So again, this speaks to the importance of using our own languages to, do these types of things. And part of, I guess, the inception of Abibitumi Kasa, my parents had a bookstore and cultural center, and we would have people come in and they would speak about Pan-Africanism and all of these concepts, but they're doing it in English. So my question was, why can't we discuss these types of things in our own languages? Well, Abibitumi Kasa is talking about Black Power language in our own languages. And again, that goes to the second quote. So the languages taught over the years have been Akan, Chi from Ghana, Yoruba, primarily spoken in Nigeria, Wolof, primarily in Senegal, also Gambia. Lingala, we have a study group from DRC, Kikongo. I don't do all of these, but we have other people who do some of these as well. Medunetra, this is how it's written, hieroglyphics from Kemet, what we now call Egypt. Ewe is given on demand, also a language of Ghana. Ga on demand from Ghana. We've had Kiswahili in the past. We're looking for new Kiswahili teachers. Hey, hey, hey. I've been speaking small Kiswahili with people. I think I've gotten a chance to at least greet in about 30 languages since I've been here. So I really am enjoying this. Songhai was a language that we, for people who may know, ancient Ghana, Mali, Songhai Empire, that the language is still spoken and is very vibrant as well. And because this was kind of a one-man show for a long time, I did the graphic design, the web design. I was the president, CEO, janitor, and everything in between. But now we have other people who are on board as well. So Abibitumi Kasa, by the numbers, we get between 1,500 and 2,000 unique users per day. This is Google Analytics, between 40 and 45,000 users per month. We're a very kind of small niche, but we've kind of carved a space for ourselves. So this is within the last month. We started using Google Analytics in 2011. We started in 2005, but since we started using Google Analytics, we've tracked just short of 1 million users, 2 million page views, over 1 million sessions. If we would have been using Google Analytics, we used something else before Google killed off everything else. But if we would have used it, of course, we would have been a lot higher, I'm sure. Geographical User Distribution. Over the last month, the majority of users are coming from the United States. We have over 9,000 users from there. Kenya, close second. We have a lot of Kiswahili resources there, 5,000. India, Ghana, Nigeria in 7th position, so forth and so on. Geographical User Distribution since 2011. You see the US is highest with over 250,000 since 2011. Ghana, UK, Nigeria, so forth and so on. And how do we get these users? The main thing is that we have a lot of content, over 100,000 threads, articles, PDFs, videos, all there in the forums. So if you do a search for anything about Africa, at some point in time you're going to come across Abibitumi Kasa. You may have seen it before and just said, oh, this is some website, but there's so much information about Africa in so many various aspects. So we use the forums, and the majority of users are coming through Google, you know, searches and things of that nature. And then once they come, they become members and they are integrated into the ecosystem. So for the forums, we have 6,000 members, 142 active at any point in time, over 100,000 threads, 125,000 posts. And these are forums. If anyone remembers forums, those existed before Facebook killed off everything. But these are, you know, kind of not necessarily social network, kind of anti-social networks. We're all here and we're interested in the same thing. So there are some very thriving forums, some hundreds of thousands of users, but we have, again, a very small niche of people who have, you know, to some degree, like mind and interests. We have a mailing list, just short of 10,000 subscribers on the mailing list. So we add our forums to the mailing list. There's some degree of overlap there, but of course there are more on our mailing list. And then customers, I don't know if you can see this, but since we started using this particular system, ZenCard is open source. We started using this around 2011. We've had 1,300 customers. Before that, we just had PayPal buttons and small other things like that. But, you know, we kind of try to keep track of this to see how we're moving. Alexa rankings, we're the top top 500,000 websites. We went down because we had a massive server crash last month. We got a little bit too big for ourselves. We needed more RAM, more space, more everything. So you see we dropped 100,000 spots within 1 month, but we'll be right back up by next month. So we were founded in 2005, first as a blogspot, and this is me here with my little blogspot hat on. And we started as an independent site April 2006. I had a friend who was like, you know what, I have a site, but I'm not going to use it anymore. I'm working in a university. I don't have time for it. So he gave me hosting for like 2 years, the domain name, everything. He just sent me an email saying, oh, your domain name is ready. Of course, I had absolutely no knowledge of how to do anything ICT, but it's on-the-job training. And this is what Abibitumi Kasa looks like now. This is a beautiful sister from Ghana Fest in Chicago. I snapped that, and now since I do the digital graphic design, I put that together again. This is on ZenCart. Before that, there used to be something called Flash, and this is what the website looked like. Previously, it was, of course, a bit bigger. Here it's in the slideshow. But we had all of this going on Flash. So here you see me with my kente cloth and my Ochiami staff. And, you know, we had all the other different instructors. We do primarily African languages. This is Renoko Rashidi. He dealt with the global African presence. We had a Kiswahili instructor here based in Tanzania. So we focus primarily on language, but because we're interested in African liberation as a whole, African languages are part of that, but aren't the totality of that. 30 seconds, I hope that's not for me. All right, let's keep going. And I may have got locked into the Flash. Keep going, Flash. This was the very first iteration of the site, made in HTML, very bright, very busy. We've changed slightly as you've seen over the years, but it was an HTML site. No coding experience. I just looked at view source code from a site that I liked. I saw these tables. Tables are now, you know, outlawed and banned. But I just said, okay, let me do the tables. Oh, I see how to put an image in there. So very much from scratch, on-the-job training, and it's kind of like a hobby. It's less profit-driven or development-driven. It's more so ideology-driven. This is why I do it. I feel it's very much tied to my own destiny and my purpose. So we have learning materials. We send PDFs. This is one for Chi, one for Yoruba, one for Wolof. So we send them the PDF. We have the PDF and we stream live online. After the class, I record each class to MP3. After each class, they get a copy of the MP3 because there's so much that doesn't come up in the text, but we may just do a sidebar into proverbs, into cultural points, things of that nature, and those really enrich the class so the students can always have that information as well. So the streaming solutions, we first started off using FlashChat. This is from about 2006 to 2011. It was a $5 FlashChat module. I, of course, implemented it myself because I was also the web designer in addition to everything else. And that worked for a while. It was integrated into the forums via bulletin, so that was something that we used, but we outgrew it. And we went to Flash Comms, which was from about 2011 to 2014. And that was another more robust solution. From there, we went to AnyMeeting, and we're still using this one. We had to outsource it. What I liked about the previous tool is that it's in-house, if we're talking about sovereignty, doing for self. But eventually, we got too big to be able to run the Flash communication server and everything else ourselves, so we kind of outsourced. So we see that as kind of a tactical retreat, but in the future, we'll try to get back to doing these things ourselves. Now, the main format we use, this is coming to the heart of the e-learning, is a simulclass format. You've heard of simulcast. This is simulclass, so we have people in the room here, and this is running out of my home office. You have people in the room, and then you also have people online, so I'll give you a little snippet of this.
Online, I'm representing intermediate key. We have Sarah Dion, as well as out of DC. Sarah Dion is out of Atlanta, representing Intro Yoruba.
So these are students who are here, and then we have the students who are online. So people get a kick out of this. It's like, wow, you can do that. Especially during the classes, I'll have somebody in the UK conversing with someone in Ghana, have the person in Ghana conversing with somebody in the Caribbean, so they're holding a conversation, you know, like this. I want to skip forward to about the 13-minute mark so you can see people actually. Okay, she did a good job. We're going to skip. But you get a sense of how it works. So basically the person will go through, this is final presentation. So the person will present their final project. They've learned over the course of 8 different individual courses, and each person presents what they have done. And after the 8 courses, they're conversational in the language. So they can hold a conversation dealing with greetings, name, where they're from, what they like, what they do for a living, and all these things. And because it's based on conversation, we have conversations every class. You can't finish the class without having conversations because that's what we've done every class. So people really enjoy that, get a kick out of that. We also have final presentations on Skype as well. And one thing that we do, my sister, we were talking about the children, is that we have the classes and those have a cost, but the children take the class for free. 13 and under is free. So we try to really encourage entire families learning. So the parents pay for the class, but the children don't pay for the class. And we have a lot of heritage learners, people who are born abroad in the US or UK, and they hate their parents because their parents didn't teach them their language. They say, oh, why have you crippled me so? This is a sister out of the UK. She is Ghanaian, Creole Wallace. She's speaking Chi. So she went from absolutely no Chi at all to now she is able to give an entire monologue about herself, her family, and so forth. So it's very much empowering. The comment before of indigenous languages are going to die. If anything, they may be saved from Africans in the diaspora because those tend to be the ones who are much more serious and really see the value. Sometimes you have to lose something before you see the value of it. And oftentimes, like I'm in Ghana, I'm at the Institute of African Studies, all my colleagues, I greet them in their indigenous language. The one I'm fluent in is Chi, like about native speaker level, but they say I shame them, I embarrass them into speaking their own languages because I'll use the indigenous greeting, whereas they would say, good morning. I'll say, Ojeko. They say, Ojemra. So, you know, that's kind of a thing where when you see people coming from the diaspora who've mastered the language to a certain level, it really either inspires them or shames them, but either way we get them going in the right direction. This is another quick thing, and I'll show it. This was a presentation from Yoruba, and they're singing a song called Shionrere in Yoruba. So he's Yoruba, and he's teaching his children Yoruba, so they're singing the song Shionrere, and that was their final presentation. They said, we want to do this as a family. All of them play instruments, and they did a good job. And then this is another thing we do is we post the final presentations on YouTube, so that's again something for the e-learning so that they can come back to it. This young man, he moved away from Ghana, but he can always see what he did. Yes, look at what I accomplished, and show his friends because it's, you know, online. Mobile is the thing, so we also have mobile applications for the forums so that people can connect. Forum runner, Tap a Talk. Basically, we're open to anything. We need to, you know, get to our objectives, our goals. So we say, if it's open source, cool. If it's closed source, cool. If it's any source, cool. We're trying to do what we're trying to do and get to our objectives. So it should be open source, I'm sure. When we use Joomla, we use some things that are open source by all means, but not everything. Cometchat, we use that for the forums. Now, testimonials, this brings it home because this was a student of mine in Chicago, and we just took this on Tuesday at Addis Ababa University. So he was we're still on good terms, that's basically the thing. He took the classes way back in Chicago, and now we're still in touch, and I'm staying next to him. He's taking me around the city. So, you know, these connections, he's now speaking Amarinya. But he was saying, yes, kind of what I alluded to before, that I speak to people in Yoruba, Chi, Kikongo, Wolof, and he says, indigenous speakers are like, what is this? I can't believe this. His parents must be from Africa. How does he do this? So he was always impressed with that because he had an uncanny ability of always running into native speakers of whatever language he was studying. He was studying Yoruba. He would be at the gas station. The person next to him speaks Yoruba. So he put that person on the phone. I don't know if he was testing me or what. The one was like, he speaks better than me. So then he was like, okay, I've paid good money for this class. So again, we're on good terms. And we're still spreading the word. This is TV3 here in Ghana. And I was on, basically, this was something that I was dealing with technical terms in scientific terms that a lot of indigenous speakers are like, we don't have any word for that. But if you go to ancient texts, or if you go to some of the more meta language texts, these words exist. And it's really mind-blowing, like, wow, I thought our languages were primitive. I thought we only had 50 words in our language. Coke, I want to get a Coke. But there's so much more than that. All right, so we continue. We spread the word. We have these flyers of great African heroes, Ya Santua, who fought against the British. Malcolm X, by any means necessary. That's how we deal with our software. Open source, closed source, by any means necessary. Thank you, Malcolm X, for that. Harriet Tubman, Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah. So we just, have these in the U.S. That's where my family is. Have them in Ghana. People are, spreading the word. But most of this, again, comes from word of mouth. You haven't seen our billboards here in Addis Ababa because we haven't had billboards in Addis Ababa. But we've had, over 1 million years in the past, 1 million users in the past couple of years, just by word of mouth. People are like, I get with this. I have the person who does the Kikongo and Lingala study group. He's in Martinique. He's like, yo, I want to do this. I'm like, cool. He helps with the emailing campaigns. So just people who have similar and shared vision, they buy into it and they become a part of what is a family. Now, we're dealing with our subtitle of what the private sector can teach universities, or what universities can learn from the private sector. One thing I teach at Institute of African Studies, I started doing basically what I was doing with Abibitumi Kasa. We have seminars and they put me as a coordinator of seminars. And usually that's a thing where, oh, you're a new kid on the block, here's a prank, go do the seminars. But I turned it into something different. I said, I'm going to advertise these. We're going to stream these live on Skype. We're going to put these on YouTube. So the entire campus was talking about this, to the point that the business school people are coming to me, how do you do this? The provost is like, we need this for the college, everyone in the college. So it became just basically what I had learned on the job in the private sector. In the private sector, if it doesn't work, you don't eat. Okay, time. So we had a partnership. I have like 2 slides left, so I'm done. We had a partnership with a major state university in the U.S. to do simulclass for Yoruba. But just a couple of days ago, I got this email. Has the director told you that the teaching online has stalled? Our idea has been taken up by the state system with a pilot program in China. But basically, she said no one on my campus seemed to know what to do to implement our online teaching. It's as simple as, just as you do Skype, just put up a laptop, a projector, and you're rolling, and internet, and you're rolling. But entire universities in the U.S., it's not just an Africa problem. They're like, we don't know how to do this. I'm like, hey, so all of you who have these skills, in your own way, you can try to implement some of these things. Conclusions. So lessons. One is openness to try new learning solutions. I've tried I didn't show you all of the software we've used over the years. We've tried so much in terms of learning solutions. Openness to try non-standard learning solutions, video, audio, music, whatever. Knowledge production to attract users. This is something that I think could really help universities. You just provide articles, whether it's preprint, prints, or whatever, and everyone comes to your site because they're searching for it and they find your site. Greater monetization. I also think some of this knowledge production can be sold in a much better way to benefit the universities, and we really need that here. Again, in the private sector, if it doesn't work, you don't eat. There's no room for being lackadaisical. And the university as a whole, University of Ghana, has made some strides there, but I think departments, institutes on a smaller level can do more to get their content out there. And I think universities need to move with the same urgency as the private sector people do, or face a potential educational Arab Spring, an upheaval where the masses, connected by mobiles and social media, overthrow the established order with its institutions, officials, and values, and bureaucracy, because they're like, you're irrelevant, we're doing our own thing. All right, so this is my contact information, info@abibitumikasa.com. It's spelled just like it sounds. And in conclusion, I'm a second knowledge dua Madam Wasi. Nyeyi wala don akwe kaka jerengenjef eshe asantini sana matondo mingi fofo.
We've got time for about 5 minutes of questions. So who wants to kick off? Anyone?
Obviously, I'm dying to kick off. But let me just explain why I attended this session. I'm also interested in language preservation, especially around the richness of the language. The thing that you alluded to, we see the same thing in Setswana, which is the national language of Botswana. People that speak it these days think it's not rich. Yeah. Oh, people that speak it these days think it's not a rich language. But when you go back at old Setswana, you find a lot of words that convey the same message, even better than English, given the cultural context. So that's what I do in my spare time. Additionally, my tribal language is not a written language. It's one of those that are dying. And at the personal level, I take it upon myself to try and preserve it. Just preservation. But where we don't agree is, I don't believe you can force people to speak a language that doesn't make economic sense for them to speak. You can preserve it, but I'm only going to speak a language that makes sense for me to speak. If it doesn't make sense, I'm going to stop it. I'll give you an example from my house. I come from a tribe with tribal languages in Britain. My wife speaks the national language. I had to give up on my tribal language when it came to my children, because the bottom line is, if I try to force them to learn my tribal language, they're going to fall behind on the national language. So it's a choice that I just had to say, you know what, let them go with the national language. So you find that a lot if you go to places like Joburg. Joburg is in South Africa. It's a melting pot of all of these 11 official languages that she's alluding to. You can't say to somebody, speak Zulu only or speak Xhosa only. No, they mix and match. It's exactly the same with your language in Joburg. It's a mix and match. So in the long term, in the Joburg area, tribal languages are going to die, whether you like it or not. So that's where I'm coming from. English, you speak it because it puts bread on the table. So you're forced to speak it, whether you like it or not. My tribal languages, even if I don't speak it, I still eat. So that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I think English is a dying language. Why? Because I look at things in terms of 1,000-year increments. So it's already on the way out, and what we decide determines whether or not it's on the way out. Now, when I think about Chinese, you know, maybe about 40 years ago, people weren't so interested in learning Chinese, but the Chinese decided that our language is they made a decision, our language is going to be if not the dominant language. So basically I see, in the African context, what we decide now determines what will be the language spoken in 1,000 years from now. If we're just talking about, 10 years, 5 years, whatever. In my own house, I homeschool my children. My daughter and I, we speak Chi. I've never spoken to her in English at all. And me and my wife, we speak Yoruba. So my daughter now has Chi and Yoruba because we made it a law in the house. One of my colleagues downstairs, she said, I'm so ashamed my children don't speak any language. Me and my husband are from the same ethnic group, but all they speak is French. And I was like, you're not making any laws in your house. But basically, whatever you determine the future will be, that's what it will be. Mainly, we deal with the dominant languages, major languages, less so than the small languages, but we do have some of the smaller languages. But if you decide what it's going to be, that's what it will be, in my view. That's how if you look at where English came from this tiny cave language in the butt crack of Europe somewhere, to now it's like a universal language. How could that ever happen? If we ever needed inspiration that a tiny, remote, irrelevant language can become important, just look at English. If it can happen for that, then by all means it can happen for our languages.
I'm taking notes.
Last question.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's just a contribution to what I just said. I'm Adijari Amoro from Nigeria. I teach yoga online, not for commercial purposes yet. 4 main objectives include the fact that the African languages are being proposed as already put into joke here, going into extinction. And with that behind my mind, I said, no, it should not be. Secondly, during the slave trade, most of the West African people were moved to the Americas, and they settled there, and now they are planning to come back home because of the heritage that you have, and they are keen on learning the language even more than those of us at home. So that is part of the objective I have. Thirdly, I have the reason that most of the people in the rural area are not English speaking. And we have donor nations that give money for health and other social welfare services. When the doctors come in, the woman or the man in the village has headache or something else somewhere, he cannot explain to the English speaking or Spanish speaking doctor. So if we can encourage these foreigners who come in there to learn the local language, it facilitates their mission to the environment. And lastly, the entrepreneurs that come from, we have investors that come in, we discover that from research, if they can interact very well in the local languages, it helps to promote business. So that's what I've been working on, and I feel it's a good thing. Obadele, thank you. And only you declare that you are Yoruba because Obadele is a Yoruba name. So that's how I was trying to pick him on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done for what you are doing. Yes.
This is a very good point, and you know, to come to the economic piece, I did my PhD at the University of Ghana, completely unsubsidized. The way I put my way through school, through the PhD, and they charge in dollars, was entirely through teaching African languages online. So I brought other, people from the linguistics department on board to show them that their language has economic value, that when you can use ICT and use this online, that people are paying $195 for a 4-week class. This is how important it is to people there. So once they see that, I have one guy who always comes to my house because he was doing translations for me. Any new translations? So he's seen that his language has an economic value. Some translations that I've done have been like $1,000 for just one little quick thing. So this shows to some degree the economic value. And another thing in terms of people coming from abroad to learn the language, my Yoruba teacher, when I was in Ibadan, we went to Abeokuta, and I would always do the transactions in Yoruba, even with the numbers. So I would say, Ogoron, whatever. And the people there only use English. So he would say, Ojutin, Abiotin. Like, are you ashamed or aren't you ashamed? How can this guy? So again, what we determine will be the future, that's going to be the future. If we decide this has economic value, we can see, especially with ICT, how we can make this have economic value.
I have a comment about this approach of being ashamed or not teaching, let's say, your daughter English. Why should anybody take an approach? I speak 2 other languages. I used to work in language services in Western America, translating Amharic to Korean and other languages. One thing I've noticed as a journalist is, sure, you can speak the language, so what? We have to go beyond that, and what's missing is literature, wisdom that's being passed from one generation to one generation is missing in the process. You can master 10 languages, show what your skills are. What's the point if you don't know the historical context of how this language, that's one thing. I think this approach of, I want to empower Africans and eliminate English, or at least why not complement whatever asset that you have. You speak fluent English. I assume that you've learned or you've had some sort of American education. This is pure assumption. Is that true? So I'm assuming your daughter can benefit from having international clout and in addition to her native language skills, is what I'm thinking. So that approach would benefit him.
This is a good point. You should go to amakambon.com and see her essays in English, and then see her essays in Chi, and then see her essays in Yoruba, and then see her writing in Medu Necha. So she mastered English long before she came to stay with me permanently in Ghana. So that one is already there. People always say, oh, look at how articulate she is. So she already has that. In addition, it's not necessary for you to not know the culture, the historical background. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned at the outset, I think you may have come in late, that the whole purpose is to teach the worldview, the spirituality. So we practice African spiritual systems, right? So all of this is embedded in the language. How will you know about it? So when I was learning Yoruba, I said I will never read anything about Yoruba religion in English. I will learn it in Yoruba because I wanted to learn the language in the context of the culture. So these things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And again, Kambon.com, you can see her writings.
How do you spell it?
AMAKambon.com. And she does videos where she sells vegan food and all these other types of things online.
So Chris, over to you. Questions for Chris? Anyone? Or other comments just on the session?
I have a comment.
Sorry.
Okay. I am eLearning Pascal here. You are all talking about preserving English language, African language. Imagine that in 100 years, I find an ancient translation of African language. Why can I do to want to know how I can spell the word? Do you think about the pronunciation of the word? Because I am actually working on that. I'm working on the sentence in African language. That was my point. How do you do about translation of English of African language word?
So can I just go to you some questions? We'll ask 3 questions and then you can do comments.
It's actually closely related to you, so I'll just wait to get the answer then.
Are you sure you don't want to ask it?
Yes, it's closely.
And who you?
Yeah, I just wondered if I correctly followed what all of you here said. And the local language is something not only to be preserved, it's only to be used because of the advantage it gives pedagogically for children at lower grades. Assume that I'm from Ethiopia, I only speak Oromifa, let me say. And then I'm grade 1, the teacher comes and speaks in Amharic or in English. I can't understand it. We can't communicate at all. So the local language issue is not only for preservation, but it is only for pedagogical reason. If that guy speaks to me in my language, then I can communicate. It doesn't mean that abandoning English or Amharic, but until I come to that level of knowing English and Amharic, I will be advantaged to learn in my own language. Within that, it will be preserved and it will be also developed. So we have to think it that way. It's not a matter of making economy only. It's a matter of language development and pedagogical advantage.
I wanted to come to the pronunciation. For my master's, I actually work mainly on historical linguistics. And in that, what you do is you look at contemporary languages that are descendant languages of the ancient language. And from that, you can come up with reconstructions to see what the vowels must have been for this one to diverge to this, for this one to diverge to that, what the consonants must have been in order for this one. And it works systematically in what they call push chains and pull chains. If this sound disappears, then it pulls the other sounds. You can look up things like Grimm's Law to see how that worked for English. And even you see like older spellings for sounds that have been lost, but all of that goes into that. So that's actually something that we've been working with Medu Necha hieroglyphics. So because the vowels aren't present, one convention is that anytime they don't know what the vowel was, they just use the e. So they say med, do, net, whatever, they just put the e there. But if you look at the descendant languages, you can actually trace back what the original sounds must have been from all of these words. A major linguist working on that is Theophile Obenga, a contemporary of Sekhanta Joku, the university is named after in Senegal. So historical linguistics would really help with that. What are the contemporary languages like? And from that, you can trace back. That's what they did with Indo-European and other languages. To come to the other point about education, we actually at Institute of African Studies, we are working on a grant. We just submitted it for education in urban slums. Why urban slums is a challenging context. For one, because you have people with so many different linguistic backgrounds. So even though the official policy in Ghana is bilingual early transition, you may have people in the urban slum who've just moved from wherever who may speak Dagare, Dagbani, Ewe, Gai, and they're all in the same classroom. And now I think some of the policies are based on the idea of indigenous language versus colonial language. So they choose one big indigenous language versus, and that's the first 3 of primary, versus the colonial language that they will transition into. One of the ideas that we have and that we're going to pilot and implement is a multilingual approach where each student, whatever language that they have, we already have so many materials that exist, but for them to actually be able to use that in the classroom, so that requires training of teachers, that requires several different things. But we're thinking that that's sort of like a microcosm of the bigger problem of Ghana. The reason why we can't choose an indigenous language and why we have English as an official language is because we can't crack how can all of these languages be represented. Oh well, let's just go to English. If we can crack that in that small urban slum classroom, that could have implications for Ghana, that could have implications for Africa, because here we are at African Union and we're speaking English and French. I would like to come to an e-learning conference and give my presentation in Yoruba. I would like to come to e-learning and then have a translator perhaps, translate into English and French. That's not something that's in existence, but we can decide that that will come into existence if we can crack some of these things on smaller levels.
Actually, it's not a matter of bringing all the language at that level. It's just to begin the children learning in their own language. At a certain stage, you can, drop it and then let them pass to the next. This is the whole issue of multilingual education, by the way. Multilingual education is, we call it mother tongue-based multilingual education, by the way.
Yes.
We base it by mother tongue, and then we pass to other one. Because learning is igniting thinking, Unless we communicate with the children, they don't learn, they don't think. Therefore, it's just, to give them, to understand the concept you are bringing to them in their own language. Then when they reach at a certain level, then you can transit them to the next kind of, otherwise it's not taking the whole languages. For example, in Ethiopia, we have 85 plus languages. We don't mean that we are going to take all as a medium of instruction, but at the basic level, children should learn with that. And then when they come at a certain stage, we let them, do English and Amharic.
I think, sorry please.
To a follow-up,
we should
quick follow-up on what you
learn.
said.
Okay, 1, 2, what's the Lucy?
Mine is not really long. I just
Okay.
wanted to say, when we're thinking about it, it gets really murky, even within one language, for instance, even in Ethiopia, or in the region, we have, let's say, Tigrinya, and there are different dialects within the same language, and there are cultural baggages and nuances that only the people who speak the same language but have different dialects now. And so we're really entering a murky area when we're saying that this language should be spoken or representative of the entire country.
I think Yoruba,
Sorry.
just really quick to follow up on that, I think Yoruba has a very good model on that. They have what they call standard Yoruba, which is not only written but also spoken. For Akan, which is a major language in Ghana, they don't have that. They have standardized orthography, but not everyone speaks it. I think that Yoruba, because it takes into account that there are so many different dialects, that as a medium of instruction, they do Yoruba up to PhD level, where people, that's what they've done as a medium of instruction from kindergarten all the way up, that they're doing that in standard Yoruba. If we can look at, and I think this is kind of going to the idea of these different boundaries and borders. If we can look at what are these other Africans doing, they may have done it better than we did. They may have a model, and I think that we can learn from them.
Is there any last comments? So,
If you allow me, I appreciate it. And just say that we should consider what is happening in some other neighboring countries, other continents. Finland, they start their children with their mother tongue in education, as most of us know. And also India. India consider English as a second language. They start their children with their own language. And also, talking of official languages, we find that in India, they have so many official languages now, but they started gradually, maybe 2 for 2 or 3 years, learning it, distributing it among their citizens, and then now they have about 22 official languages. So in Africa, there's no way where we cannot start like that. If we want to grab about in Nigeria, we have 250 dialects of languages. No, we shouldn't go into that. We should agree together, come together and say, okay, let's pick 2 or 3 and then develop them. After that, continue to add. So that's my contribution.
Yes. Well, I think